introduction. You are most welcome.
Thank you very much, my lady.
Good morning, Amim.
Good morning to you,
My
Commissioner.
name is Charity Kisoto, a commissioner. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Mine is Isaac Ruto, member of the JSC, representing the public.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning. My name is Nzilani Caroline. I'm a commissioner. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner.
David Majanja, Judge of the High Court and Commissioner. Welcome.
Thank you, my lord.
Good morning.
Good morning, my Your
Olwande
Honor.
Evelyn, Commissioner.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, Jacqueline Ngutia, Commissioner. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning. My name is Justice Mohammed Ibrahim, Supreme Court Commissioner.
Thank you, my lord.
Good morning.
Good morning, my lady.
My name is Fatuma Sichale, Judge of Appeal and Commissioner JSC.
Thank you, my lady.
Thank you, commissioners. Madam Amimo, make yourself comfortable.
Yes, my lady.
There is some water in front of you, and the commissioners will be asking you questions. If you want to seek any clarification, you are free to do so. And to start us off, I would like you to confirm to us your county.
My county, my lady is Vihiga.
Vihiga.
Yes, my lady.
And your ethnicity?
Luya.
Thank you very much. The first set of questions will be asked by Really Justice Sishari.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Ms. Amimo, please tell us about your professional life, highlighting key achievements that make you suitable for the position that you've applied for of a judge of the High Court.
Okay, my lady, I'll begin by citing that I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I was admitted on the 8th of May, 2008, and I am a graduate of Moi University, class of 2005. Since admission, I have purely worked in a lot law firm setups, 5 to be precise. If you'll allow me, my lady, I will only mention 3. Currently, I work with the firm of Macharia Mwangi and Jeru Advocates, and this I have been attached to as an associate since the 1st of July, 2015. Prior to that, my lady, I worked with the firm of Archer and Wilcock for a period of about 1 year and 7 months. And prior to that, my lady, I worked with the firm of Kinyanjui Juguna and Co-Advocates for a period of 4 years and 8 months. My lady, I have had the opportunity to represent clients in various matters. And this is not only in the Milimani or the Nairobi court station, but I've also had the opportunity to go to other towns like Mombasa, Eldoret, Kitale, all the way to Kilungu, Kitui, Machakos, all the way to Karatina, all the way to Baricho, and many other court stations, my lady. I've also...
So you've been in the practice of the law from the year 2008 to date?
Yes, my lady.
Any special branch of the law that you tend to lean towards?
Now, the practice areas, I was coming to that, my lady. I've had the opportunity to attend to various matters. I've attended the Court of Appeal in a few matters. I've also had the opportunity to attend specialized courts, like the Environmental and Land Court, the Employment and Labor Relations Court, and also I have matters before the High Court. The bulk of the matters are under the Commercial Court, the Civil Court, and the family-related matters, my lady. I've also appeared before the Chief Magistrate Court and also including the Small Claims Court, my lady.
All right. Thank you for that. And what are your attributes? If we were to ask you, what do you bring on board if you were to be the successful candidate?
My lady, by virtue of the kind of litigation that we handle, I would first point out that the key achievement that I've been able to bring about is a contribution to jurisprudence. If you were to look at my CV, my lady, there are a total of about 30 reported cases. right from the year 2017. There could be more, but I constrained myself to the period of year 2017. So I have contributed to the jurisprudence in not only in commercial, but also land matters and also the civil matters, my lady. And the key attribute I'll be bringing, my lady, is I would be bringing efficiency. Why do I talk about efficiency? You do realize that as a practicing advocate, that the tool I have been using is Order 11 in terms of ensuring compliance in all of my matters. And you, once you're compliant in terms of filing your, for example, your witness statements and documents, you're actually ready to proceed with your matters. And that, my lady, has contributed to me actually concluding matters at a very high rate.
So you bring efficiency?
Yes, my lady.
Anything else that you bring on board?
I would find myself as a team leader. Currently, I work in a supervisory role. I have court assistants and also have pupils who are working under my lead. And I'm able to, and I'm glad to report that since I was given this role in the year 2020, I have been able, there are 2 advocates who have been able to mentor and currently are practicing and actually practicing well, my lady.
Very well. And finally for me, of course, having been an advocate from the year 2008 and practiced in our courts.
Yes, my lady.
I'm sure there are certain attributes that you see amongst the judges or judicial officers that you think that if I become a judge, I am not going to be like Mr. or Miss X.
Yes,
what
my
are
lady.
Those?
My lady, my concern would be on perhaps on a competency level, because you notice that some of the judgments and rulings that are churned from some of our courts do not really articulate the issues that have been raised by the parties. So if I were to become a judge and given that opportunity, my desire would be that I'll be able to churn qualitative and quantitative judgments. Then too, my lady, I have seen some magistrates or judges who are temperamental. They're not really keen to hear the sides of the parties, and they're quick to make decisions. And my lady, in that front, if I were to be given an opportunity, I would desire to have a listening ear, to listen to everyone's views before making proper directions in the matter, my lady.
Thank you. I want to clarify, which area of law did you say is your strength?
I have a lot, my lady. I have commercial, I have civil, and I have family-related matters, and employment matters, and also land matters, my lady. And also, yes, my lady.
Yes. Under the Constitution.
Yes, my lady.
Just tell us which orders can be issued if one were to file a case seeking the determination of fundamental rights.
My lady, I would be guided by Article 23 of the Constitution, and we have various reliefs under that that article. That would be the order of injunctions. Would be able to issue conservatory orders, an order for compensation, an order for habeas corpus, and a declaration declaring a law perhaps invalid, and declaration of rights. And one that is not purely stated is statutory interdicts, as guided by the Mitubel case.
Yes, and what circumstances do you issue statutory interdicts?
My lady, I believe it is instances where you're giving supervisory orders, especially, for example, where the government has breached certain articles in the Constitution. So, my lady, the court will actually be giving directions in terms of, number one, articulating the kind of breach that has been occasioned by the government, how that breach can be rectified, and my lady would be also giving an action plan on what needs to be done so that that breach can be rectified, my lady.
Okay. The next set of questions will be asked by Justice Majanja.
Good morning.
Good morning, my lord.
I heard you speaking that you are very efficient in handling cases and you rely on Order 11. But in one of the cases you cite, the case was actually dismissed for want of prosecution. What went wrong?
My lady, this is a matter that actually was given to me a few days. It was actually been handled by another advocate. But then again, I would not want to lay blame on that. I think as a firm, we did not utilize the bring-up system too well, because had we done what we were supposed to do, that matter, my lord, would not have been dismissed. It was a bit of negligence on our part,
Okay.
I must admit.
Secondly, I've looked at your CV, and on pro bono activities, you say regrettably, I have been unable to commit to pro bono activities as my availability for such activities is contingent upon discretion of my employer, which has limited my ability to participate.
Yes, my lord.
So for the 15 years you've been practicing, you have not been involved in any pro bono activities?
Unfortunately, Lord, not my lord.
Have you had, like for example, I'm sure you go to church?
Yes, my lord.
And you don't involve yourself in pro bono activities?
Or
what do you understand by pro bono activities?
I think my understanding, of course, is that you're giving free legal advice to those who are unable to, get that service.
Is it limited to free legal advice?
I think when I was answering that question, my lord, I was a bit narrow-minded. But of course, in church, you would have members who actually come and seek for legal advice. But I did not think in that aspect. Yes.
And as a judge, why do you think it's important that why do you think we emphasize pro bono activities for this position? Why do you think it's important?
My lord, it is important because everyone has a right to access justice as guided by Article 48 of the Constitution, and also as guided by Article 159, where everyone is supposed to access justice regardless of status, my lord.
Okay. Finally, you've heard of the Small Claims Court.
Yes, my
it's
lord.
It's an important door to justice.
Yes, my lord.
Can you just tell us some of the controversial decisions that have been made in regard to that court?
I think I will point out one that is most recent, my lord, where the court stated that that the Small Claims Court does not have jurisdiction to handle what you call personal injury claims. My lord, the reasoning behind that judgment was that based on two issues. One is the aspect of service of notice under Section 10, subsection 2 of Cap 4.5, and also the aspect of general damages you cannot quantify.
And so what is your view?
My view is I am not really in agreement with that, because there's a reason why that statute provides that that court can hear personal injury claims. My lord, if you were to look at the nature of personal injury claims, for example, soft tissue injuries, I am yet to come across a judgment that is beyond 1 million, because when you look at the pecuniary jurisdiction, it is not more than 1 million.
That's good enough. Finally, as a High Court judge, how would you support the Small Claims Court? How would you support the Small Claims Court?
You notice that the small claim courts usually have a limited number of days within which to conclude their matters. So, my lord, if at all there are matters that emanate from the Small Claims Court on appeal level, then it will actually be befitting if one is able to conclude their matters in the shortest time possible, to give meaning and effect to the Small Claims Court Act.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my lord. Thank you, my lord.
Now, I've read your sample writings.
Yes, my lord.
Sorry, thank you. I've read your sample writings. They're very concise. And when you were, most of them is where you're acting for parties. I've seen for the respondent, for the petitioners, and so on. You are speaking to the judge or the magistrate, the judicial officer. But now as a judge, how do you think you would like or you intend to present your rulings or judgments? How do you structure your judgment, for instance?
Okay, first of all, I would start by setting out the issues that have been laid out in the various pleadings. For instance, for example, I'll start, with the plaintiff's case, then the defendant's case. I'll be able to bring out the factual issues and what exactly is the cause of action. Then upon doing that, my lord, I will be able to analyze, of course, the facts in tandem with what the law provides, and be able to make a informed conclusion and do a balanced effect
After
on the outcome.
After giving the background, giving the background and the parties' brief cases, you will finally go to the issues, right?
Yes, my lord.
Yeah. How do you identify the issues?
The issue will be guided by what is contained in the respective pleadings, my lord. By the cause of action and, of course, the reliefs that have been sought, my lord. Yes, my
How
lord.
do you deal with the preliminary objection on a point of law?
My lord, it behooves of a judicial officer to deal with that issue first, because you do realize if the court does not have jurisdiction, then you have no business in handling that matter. So that would be the first thing to handle before any other issue is handled, my lord. And if you find that you do not have jurisdiction, then you will not have to proceed with all the other issues that have been mentioned, my lord.
When you're writing a judgment, whom do you think is your audience?
My audience is the public. But this in this
You know the
system-
judge first?
audience.
Yeah, I mean, meaning the person who should understand what you're saying.
Or I should be the first person to understand what it is I'm reading and be able
No,
to.
you are presenting to, okay. Yeah, you're writing as a judge.
Yes, my lord.
But no, when you are writing as a lawyer, you are talking to the judge. But now, as a judge, you're speaking to.
I'm speaking to the litigants, my lord. Other than talking to myself, I'm also speaking to the litigants and also the public in general, because there are people who will also have contact with those judgments and rulings. So I'll have a whole spectrum outlook, my lord.
And you know your cases will be reported.
Yes, my lord. I'm aware of that, my lord.
To what extent will you use legalese? That terms like stare decisis, res judicata. What is your duty to the public?
My duty to the public would be to, as much as, yes, these are legal terms, it behooves you as a judge to be able to explain why are you saying res judicata, what exactly does it mean? When you're talking about all these other Latin words, you also have to bring it down to the people, because you remember, they also have a right to actually, when they're looking at this judgment or ruling, they have the opportunity to understand what it is you're trying to put across, my lord.
Finally, is a judgment, the way you present your judgment, deliver, is it part of access to justice?
Yes, it is part of access to justice, because once you deliver on a matter, that would mean you've put a sort of finality on the issue. Because remember, when litigants are coming before your court, they're coming to seek for a solution. And they're hopeful that once they go through the judgment, that they'll be able to get guidance on what to do next upon delivery, my lord.
Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, my lord.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning once again, Council.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Just picking up from where Judge Ibrahim has left, I do agree with him that you write well-reasoned pleadings, and I must commend you for that.
Thank you.
I also want to raise an issue with the use of exclamation marks in your pleadings. And just picking excerpts from Daily Journal, they say when you use exclamation marks in judgments or any legal documents, it's equivalent of barking at a judge, shouting, or gesticulating wildly. What are your thoughts around that? Because I've noticed you use quite a lot of exclamation marks in your documents.
Maybe perhaps I should start by saying that why I use the exclamation marks actually is to bring out, is to more like saying emphasis added. But I also appreciate the nature of the remarks that have been made in the article. I think I'll be more careful and going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
My second question, again, just a quote from Judge Amy Barrett. I think during her confirmation hearing, she had to say this about a judge. A judge must apply the law as written. Judges are not policymakers and must be resolute in setting aside any policy view they might hold. What is your thought around that quote?
To some extent, I agree, and to some extent, I do not agree. Because what would happen, for example, if you're handling a constitutional matter, and especially in, for instance, where you have, I'm sure, Commissioner, you're aware that where some provisions have been made unconstitutional, I think as a judge, if you were to apply a purposive approach and in tandem with Article 259, I think as a judge you cannot be narrow-minded. You have to be progressive in how you do your judgments.
That is on the bit of you agree with it. You do not agree with
Yes,
it. How about the issue of you agree with it? So you're saying it's 50-50.
Yes.
So kindly expound more.
To the extent that I agree with it is that also you, as a judge, you must realize that you should not, because you see, Commissioner, when you're talking about policy making, that is not the duty of a judge, because that would mean you are actually overreaching your mandate. And there's a question of separation of powers, because everyone should be able to work within their confines, Commissioner.
Okay. Lastly, is that Kenyans today have woken up to news, the Daily Nation, where the U.S. Trade Representative has stated that there is corruption within the judiciary, and if you allow me to quote, is that while judicial reforms are moving forward, bribes, extortion, and political consideration influence these cases. As such, foreign and local investors risk lengthy and costly legal procedures. End of quote. How does corruption interfere with judicial independence?
Commissioner, it does interfere, because that would mean that you're actually trying to, because my lady, Commissioner, let me put it this way. When you're actually bribed, that would mean that I have to play to your tune. And that would mean that I am deviating from what I'm supposed to do rightly, so that where I was supposed to rule in a particular matter, if I were to go to be straitjacket, then that would mean that the way I think is interfered, and I'd have to look the other way, and that would be an injustice to the litigants or those people who approach the court for help.
And how would you then promote decisional independence at the same time promote accountability?
For me, I think, for example, I do appreciate that judges have, for example, they have what you call the researchers. And for me, as much as, yes, judges have researchers, it is a question of appreciating what the research individual has done and be able also to make my informed decision. Because I think it will be a sad state of affairs where you're being guided, yes, and you're using 100% what the researcher has done. So it boils down to me as a person, as an individual, doing what I need to do, and that is being independent. Yes, I appreciate the work you have done, the research that you have done, but I have to come up with my own way of thinking, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next set of questions will be answered by
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and welcome again.
Thank you.
Now, when we were preparing for this exercise, we had a session with the stakeholders, and they told us that they would want a judge who understands the complexities of the judicial system, including the challenging environment and the power dynamics. Do you agree with that, and why do you think it's important to have that understanding?
It is important to have that kind of understanding, Commissioner, because you do realize that when you're serving litigants, when you're serving the advocates by extension.
First of all, do you believe that there is complexity in the judicial system?
Yes, there is complexity in the system, and therefore it is important that you have an individual who understands the dynamics, who is actually judge ready and will be able to hit the ground running, and so that any matter placed before that judge, they'll be able to handle, however technical, however complex, of course guided by the relevant statutes and the Constitution, they'll be able to handle. Because, Commissioner, if you were to have a situation whereby you have judgments that are not jurisprudently correct, then we have a problem, because that will boil down to access to justice, because that will also waste time and resources, because that would mean you have to go to a higher court to be able to rectify the wrong that has been done.
Okay. Now, judiciary has been on a transformative journey. Would you just briefly tell this panel the kind of the transformation that the judiciary has been undertaking, and how would you support this?
Okay, I am alive to the fact that there's what is called this social transformation to access to justice, which is, I think, a 10-year blueprint on the vision of what the judiciary will be in the next 10 years. What has been notable, Commissioner, is the utilization of ICT. And I'm glad that on the 11th of March, that with the guidance of the Honorable My Lady Chief Justice, there was a rollout of the e-filing in all the court stations. And to what I note about the ICT, I also note that there is a dashboard where there'll be tracking of the court activities in terms of why are there adjournments, for example, was it necessary to give an adjournment, in terms of how many rulings and judgments have been delivered by a particular judicial officer. And Commissioner, that is a step in the right direction, because when you have ICT as a component of for the service, for litigants to access justice, that actually is an enabling factor under Article 48, where everyone has the opportunity to access justice, and justice will not be delayed by virtue of the fact that you are actually in America and and that you have to travel. You don't have to travel. You can actually access justice at the comfort of your seat, Commissioner.
Okay, lastly, and I agree with you that it's important to leverage on ICT because COVID-19 introduced, of course, a new way of doing things around the world.
Yes, Commissioner.
But what risks do you think the judiciary will face, or we are exposed to risks? And how do you think that this risk will be mitigated?
I think the highest risk in as far as ICT is concerned is the element of data protection, because that would mean you have to put up a system that secures the kind of data that is in the system. Remember, you have e-filing, you have judgments and rulings, and you have all these other aspects, like, for example, maybe payment of bail or bond. And security, it is a security concern. What if there's an outsider who tries to infiltrate the system? That would mean that the information that is contained in the system will be out in the open, and I don't think that would be the intention of having an ICT component. That would be the greatest risk. So in terms of how to mitigate, I think here we'd have to have experts and professionals who, I think I liken it to, for example, a banking system, whereby the bank holds a lot of money, and you see, if they don't put their systems right, the monies that are due are being protected or being held on behalf of the customers will be diversed or to other third parties who are not supposed to be beneficiaries of that money. So if you have an expert to try and protect that interest, that would be a step in the right direction, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning once again.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Yes, I was listening to you earlier, and you alluded to a bring-up system in your law firm when you're explaining what went wrong with one of the cases that you had cited.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Could you just briefly describe for us, if you have one, the performance measurement framework that is used in your firm, the firm where you work?
It's not clearly documented, but this is what we do as a matter of practice. Mm-hmm. Every week, as advocates, including my direct supervisor, what we do, we generate reports on a weekly basis, where it is it brings out two issues. One, the kind of court activity you had. For example, if you had a hearing, you had an application or a mention, and what kind of directions were issued. Then two would be the aspect of what kind of pleadings you have generated. In terms of if have you done an application, have you done a plain order 11 compliance. That is the best we have in terms of performance. So that at the end of the week on Friday, we all converge at the boardroom and we have a discussion on the matters that we've had and progress to be made going forward. Yes.
So if today we wanted to know how you are faring on in terms of your score in the law firm where you are, because I believe there are several other associates.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Yes, so if I wanted to know how Ms. Amimo scores with the framework that you have, that
yes.
is now to demonstrate to us how you work, how would I get that information?
Then that you'd have to get it from my direct supervisor. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we don't have a framework where you say that, for example, in the month of January, I was at 90%. In February, I was at 30%.
So it's basically just a reporting system?
Yes.
It's just a reporting system?
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. You mentioned earlier the areas of work that you practice,
yes,
or rather the areas of law that you practice. And I just want, because you see, if you're successful in your bid to become a judge, tomorrow you may find yourself presiding over a criminal court.
Yes, Your Honor.
Or at Milimani in the criminal division, where you'll only be handling criminal work.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I expect you must have appraised yourself with the criminal aspect of practice, because it looks like you do a lot of civil law.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Could you tell us, if you were to do case management in a criminal case, what would you be looking out to achieve?
I will be looking out to achieve a situation whereby you were able to conclude the matters in good time. And of course, I would be looking at the rights of the accused person as guided by Article 50, Sub-Rule 2, where, for example, the accused person has a right to access the documents that would be utilized in the hearing, so that once that aspect is concluded, in terms of they have everything they need for the hearing, then I would easily progress with the hearing. Then, of course, once you are done with that compliance stage, then we're able to take a date for the hearing.
I'm interested in the compliance stage.
The compliance stage.
Yes. So you have ensured that the accused person has the documents that the prosecution will rely on. What
Yes.
else would you look out for?
I would also look out whether the accused person understands the language of the court. Because if they do not understand, for example, is from an ethnic community, does not understand English or Kiswahili, that would mean I'd have to ensure that there's an interpreter so that the accused person can follow through the proceedings. Then there's the aspect of bail and bond. We also have to look at that aspect, because you would also have to give reasonable bail and bond terms, so that you also secure the attendance and also some level of freedom, even as they are waiting to articulate their issues before the court.
Any issues concerning the actual trial that you would want to address at that point?
Maybe something to do with if there is an objection about confessions, then that would be an issue to consider. We'd have to do a trial within a trial to actually establish whether they have that confession was properly secured. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, my lady.
Okay. And I would like to know your role in leadership, and specifically, I would like you to describe your key achievements as a leader, and that is the specific achievements that can be attributed to you as a leader and your leadership excellence.
Okay, I think I will bring out perhaps two issues. As I earlier mentioned, Commissioner, I have those who work under me, and I have what I call a mentorship, though it is not really programmed, but I have those who are working under me, and I have been able to provide them with guidance on how to go about with their duties. And other than that, when there's conflicts that normally arise, like most recently, where there was a problem with how some of my team members were relating, I had to quickly come in and to resolve the issue so that we have a seamless way of working and ensuring that all the advocates are able to get the service that they require. Other than that, Commissioner, I also secure leadership in how I conduct my docket. In fact, if you were to inquire from my direct supervisor, I'm actually the lead in terms of being organized and being a timekeeper, and that, Honorable Commissioner, is leadership, because it inculcates that you have to be a timekeeper in order to be able to do your duties well, and also efficiency, where you're able to do your work well and in a manner that is pleasant before your supervisors and also to the clients. Yes. And also, I've also shown leadership in terms of jurisprudence, as I've earlier stated, where there are reported cases, about 30, Commissioner.
What's the difference between a visionary leader and one who is not visionary? What specific things a visionary leader will do as opposed to one who is not visionary?
According to me, a visionary leader is one. For example, if you'll allow me to use the Sturge blueprint, where a visionary leader will come out with a template, and I call the Sturge blueprint as one that has come out from a visionary leader, because these are things that you want to see in the 10-year plan, that you have steps that you want to undertake to be able to make the institution better, to make it more efficient, to be able to make it more responsive. So when you're talking about vision, it's about what steps are these that you're taking to be able to take the institution or the people you're working with to a higher level, achieving also excellence in the process. One who is not visionary he just wakes up in the morning and just does as they wish, with no structured way of articulating their duties. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Honorable CJ. Good morning once more.
Thank you. Good morning.
I'm going to ask you questions around Chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks about integrity and leadership. And maybe you could start by telling us, what does integrity mean to you?
According to me, integrity means working, simply put, I think I'll put it as working in an honest manner, devoid of any interference from third parties. That is how we'll simply define it.
Okay.
And then, of course, if you were to be guided by Chapter 6 of the Constitution, there are certain principles that will actually guide you. One is you have to work with, number one, honesty in the execution of your duties. Number two is that if there's any conflict of interest, you have to bring it up as soon as possible. Three, you have to act with impartiality in the execution of your duties, meaning that you do not have, you must not show favoritism or nepotism or bias. And then fourthly, you're able to excellently give services to the people. Remember, as a judge, you're required to serve the people, and therefore it behooves upon you to be excellent in the delivery of your services.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe you could tell this commission over time when your integrity was put to test and how you went about it, and perhaps any lessons that you drew from the situation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think the closest that I came to is when I was working with the firm of Kinyanjui and co-advocates. And during that time, I used to do a lot of what you'd call running down matters. And we had a policy that when you're doing such matters, you have to ensure that all the bakers of the documents are availed. So there are certain regions where the advocates, I will not mention which regions, where they would actually come to you and say, instead of us producing these documents, for example, the police abstract, the medical reports and the treatment notes, for example, because there's an expense attached to bringing these witnesses, why don't we instead give you this money, and then you will not have to, and then we will now proceed with the matters and produce the documents by consent. So at that juncture, I do remember and I do recall that I was in fact, I was not amused. And I insisted that you have to bring all your makers, and I was not interested in the money. That was the closest to me being compromised. And I had a duty to my client to ensure that their policy was actually adhered to by ensuring that all the makers of the documents were availed, and that I had to cross-examine them at that particular point. What I have learned from this Honorable Commissioner is that in the execution of your duties, you have a duty to be a person who is honest in their dealing, so that if there's any atmosphere that wants you to deviate from the path that you have taken, you should quickly avoid it, because it has an effect in your practice, because it will boil down to when you're called upon to serve in any other institution.
So some of your actions will then bring conflict.
Yes.
With the people you work with.
Yes,
How
yes.
again do you go about it?
In terms of conflict management, maybe you can rephrase the question, sorry?
When you find yourself in such a situation, you're bound to have conflict with the people you're working with.
Yes.
How would you deal with that situation?
I think for me, I would have to bring the issue to my direct supervisor to be able to intervene and to be able to guide on the way forward. That would be, for me, would be the best approach.
Okay.
Yes.
You wouldn't want to handle it by yourself?
I can, because remember, as I said, I have tried. I have made it clear to you that I do not accept such kind of conduct. So if you keep on insisting, actually it's at the point of you insisting that then I would escalate it to my superior. Okay.
Thank you. Now there's, judiciary has received attacks from external stakeholders where the institution is seen to be corrupt. What is your view on that?
I think it's more of a perception, because my proposition on that would be, if you have a feeling that the judiciary is corrupt, kindly bring that evidence before the right authority, so that once that evidence is received, then they can be able to act on it. But when you're busy doing that in the newspapers and in the media, it is of no use. If you want to be useful, tender the evidence, and the evidence will be looked at, and it will be, and if there is any probable cause, then it will be acted upon.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Commissioner Zirani. Finally, you said that you are a judge lady,
Yes, my lady.
and that the position of a judge also entails leadership qualities.
Yes, my lady.
If you are successful in this application and you are sent to a station as a judge, I want you to tell us at least 5 things you would do to organize your court so that the court is efficient in terms of clearing backlog, in terms of delivering judgments. Yes.
Okay. First things first, my lady. What I would do is I would have to convene a meeting with. Remember, there are people who already are there and they have worked in that environment. So first things first would be to convene a meeting so that I'll be able to understand and appreciate where they are, and so that once we're able to discuss, I'm able to look at that. I'll have a meeting. Then 2, we'll be able to analyze the key areas. For example, what are the problems, what are the challenges? Because if you don't do that, then you're not able to come up with solutions. So, yes. Then 3rd would be providing a solution. For example, if it's a question of backlog, where is there backlog? For example, if in a commercial court, you would find that the stumbling block usually is interlocutory applications. So is there a way we can go around without having to hear the interlocutory applications? Let us go directly to the hearing, so where parties can do Order 11 compliance, and then we'll be able to take dates for the main hearing of the suit. Yes, as opposed to applications. Then 4th, I would also employ the service tool. I have been a beneficiary of the service tool, not all, perhaps maybe on appeal matters, where if you are able to give clear directions from the word go, even before they appear before the deputy registrar, you're able to tell them in advance that in a month's time we'll have a service week, and these are the directions. If you filed your record of appeal, please ensure that you filed your submission so that on the date that you appear before the deputy registrar, it's just a question of taking a ruling date. Yes, my lady. Number 5, I think I will also look at the challenging aspect to me would be, for instance, something to do with the typing of proceedings. If we can also make that as a priority, that will also bring movement, my lady. Yes, my lady. Yes.
The use of ADR, court annexed mediation, and AJS.
Yes, my lady, I do agree.
You look at that.
Okay, thank you, my lady.
Yes. Unless there's any other question from the commissioners, thank you very much. But we also invite you to ask us a question before we bring this to an end, if you have any question.
My lady, I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Yes, my lady.
Thank you very much for your time and for availing yourself for this interview. We will consider your application alongside others, and we will get in touch with you when we complete the exercise.
Okay.
I wish you well, and thank you very much for the work you're doing in the legal profession.
Thank you very much, my lady. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Learn the fundamentals of neural networks from one of the most popular machine learning instructors, Dr. Radu. In this unique hands-on course, you'll learn core concepts and manually tweak network parameters to create a self-driving car. While this is phase 3 of his machine learning series, it's fine to start here. So let's get started.
I've been wanting to make this course for 6 years. I got the idea when Grant from 3 Blue 1 Brown posted his video on neural networks. The moment he said this.
One thought experiment that is at once fun and kind of horrifying is to imagine sitting down and setting all of these weights and biases by hand.
So welcome to my fun and horrifying new course where we'll play with neural networks inside this special playground I created. The goal is to teach the car how to drive, and we'll do that by manually changing the network parameters using the mouse wheel. We'll start with a simple network that just stops the car from going off-road and gradually increases complexity to teach the car different traffic rules as well. Dare I say, you don't need any prerequisites to start this course. I think the playground and the lessons do a good job explaining the math. I use human language and only introduce fancy terms so you know they exist, in case you find them elsewhere. But if I'm wrong and you still get confused, just ask in the comments or on Discord. Now, by changing these parameters manually, we'll understand exactly what the neural network does. This is really different because courses normally teach neural networks in a machine learning context, where they're automatically generated from data. That makes them work really well, but it becomes impossible to tell what they do exactly. It's why we call them black boxes. But I want you to understand what the neural network can do before I teach those complex algorithms for generating them. And the best way to understand, I think, is by playing with them like this. Now, this course is good for those starting with AI, but also those with some experience who want to understand things better. I've been working with machine learning for over 10 years now, and some things still surprise me. I think it's because training complex models is so easy nowadays. Just write a few lines of code and you're done. Makes us overconfident, thinking we know more than we do. I've seen many solutions that fall short, are overly complex, and use unnecessary resources. If you took my machine learning course, you know what I'm talking about. There we used a huge neural network to get the best results, but one with a fraction of the size could have good accuracy as well, and we could explain what that does. So I think there's real value in revisiting basics from time to time. Throughout the course, I'll give you homework assignments to improve your logic and deepen your understanding. I'll also give you a final challenge to teach the car how to race instead of following the rules nicely. I'll host a live stream event where I race against your AI cars, and there will be prizes. I just haven't figured out what those are yet. But stay tuned. And while you're designing your race car, I'll continue to teach how to code some things as well. For that part, you do need to know some math and JavaScript. This playlist can help with that. And we will continue the self-driving car project, so it's good to be somewhat familiar with it, but we'll mostly just add new functionality into it. So if you feel confident in your skills, take the last version from GitHub and try to follow along. What I'll teach then is how to implement Dijkstra's shortest path algorithm, so the car knows how to reach its destination. I'll also teach how to make the game mechanics. We'll control the main car, but the others will be AI. I'll show you how to monitor their progress and make the scoreboard. Now, this top view is not great when racing, I think. I'm really used to seeing things from the car's perspective. So I'll teach you how to code the camera sensor where we render what the car sees. This might be useful someday for object recognition, but for now, I just like it. And what I like even more is this view from behind the car. I'm going to teach you how to do that as well, and I'm not done. Controlling the car with the keyboard is not ideal. I'll teach you how to implement analog steering twice. First, by turning this into a mobile app and using the device orientation sensor to turn. I think it's better than using the keyboard, but I have an even better one. Using the camera, some basic image processing, and these blue wristbands, we're basically gonna become Iron Man. Oh yeah, and the sound, it's procedurally generated from scratch. All of this is just plain JavaScript, no libraries, like everything else on the channel. So you can learn all inner workings of a complex system like this. And all of this is AI. The new camera sensor, the path finding, the fancy controls using the smartphone. Or this thing, image processing, augmented reality, they all make the system more intelligent. That's what I want you to get from this course. AI is often a combination of things, not just neural networks. And artificial intelligence is not the same as machine learning. Many people confuse the two. There's no machine learning in this course. Which reminds me, someday I'll teach you how to add machine learning into the system as well. But for that, we need data. So if you want to help, go to this link and race. Try to beat my time from there. If you make an account and do a good job, your name will appear there and others will see you racing next to them. That's actually me racing. I'm recording every move we do, so I can replay it like that. But don't worry about making mistakes. For machine learning, we need to teach the car what not to do as well. So mistakes are more than welcome. Excited? Great. Now get ready to put your neurons into overdrive. This is the playground, and look at the car, it's doing something. It's applying the so-called right-hand rule for solving mazes. So if you're inside a maze, put your right hand on the wall and you'll eventually get out of it. Most of them anyway. There are some mazes where it doesn't work, but we'll get to that later. Now just look at this. The car is exploring, it's going everywhere, and it's actually great. It's not easy to do this. You can press this manual override button on the right, and now the car is controlled by the keys on the keyboard. And just try to use the arrow keys and make the car do the same things without crashing. It's really difficult, like a very tedious thing that you have to do. And if it happens so that you crash, then you can always press this other button here and the simulation will restart. So for me, this is quite challenging to get it to go even half as good as what this neural network can do. So turning off this manual override, you can see it's going much more confidently than me and knows how to turn just right. Now, let me put back on this manual override and teach you about the sensors next. So you can see these two lines coming out of the car. These are what I call sensors. And you can see what happens to this front sensor here when the car gets close to the border. It lights up. It's a proximity sensor. So it knows when something is nearby and how close that thing is. Now the sensor also has a range. So this tip here is as far as it's gonna read anything. And the values in that case are going to be 0. So now this front sensor doesn't read anything. And you can see these sensors as input values here to the network. And if you hover, the value is written there. So if I'm going to go now up here, you can see how that value is increasing from 0 to 1, essentially, or 100%. But not exactly 100%, because if I'm going to zoom here a little bit, you'll see that the sensor starts in the middle of the car. So it's not going to go all the way to 100% because the car is going to crash before that happens. So let's see where it crashed. It was at 93% or 0.93. Let's restart this simulation. And the other sensor is here on the right. And it's the second input to the matrix. And this one might actually go to 93% maybe without crashing, because the car is not as wide as it is long. But I think soon after this 0.93 now, 0.94, okay. So it can go a little bit closer than the other one just because of how the car looks like. Let's restart this simulation. And even without hovering, you can see the intensity of these inputs. Like this one is colored yellow, this one is grayed out. It indicates that this one is reading a larger value. And see how this one is now lighting up as well. The last input here is a different kind of sensor. It's the speed of the car. In phase 1 of the self-driving car course, we only had these kind of sensors implemented via raycasting. But there are other things that the car can know, like it knows its speed. So this value here is going to have negative values when going backwards and positive values when going forward. So it's a little bit different than the other two sensors. It can also have negative values. The other ones couldn't have those. And look at the color coding. When I'm going backwards, that meter there is blue, and when I'm going forward, it's yellow. So this color coding, yellow for positive values and blue for negative values, is going to appear everywhere. So you can see here negative weights that are blue, and this is a positive weight. And here, this spinning bias value here is a positive value. This one here, you know it's a negative value because it's blue. And these up here are the outputs. So the car can go forward, left, right, and in reverse. And it only goes like that if these neurons light up. So these two are lighting up now. It means that the car would like to go forward and to the left, but because of this manual override is on, it doesn't do that. I don't let it do that. But it wants to do that. So let's see what happens if I move the car forward and that right sensor here doesn't read anything anymore. What happens to the outputs there? You can see it changed a little bit. It tries to go to the right now because it wants to look for that border, for that, you know, that right-hand rule there. It looks for the border, so it's going to turn right. Let's see it do that. If I turn off this manual override, the car continues like that. And you can actually play with these values here on the right by using the mouse wheel. So, for example, you could change the value of this weight, maybe make it negative weight instead. And you can see that this is a very delicate system here. So the car doesn't work now as before anymore. But you could do that. The playground lets you play with these values any way you want. Like maybe let's make this bias also negative. It actually did something. It started working again, but then it crashed. So again, really sensitive. And I'm not going to explain to you what this network is doing right now. You will eventually understand what everything here is doing and be able to implement this logic for the right-hand rule and even the more complicated logic, like with the stop signs and traffic lights and things like that. You'll see. But we have to take things slow and step by step. So go to the top of the URL here where it says s is equal to default and type s is equal to FWD. And this here is a much simpler scenario from before. First, the car has only one sensor this time, this front-facing sensor here. But it works like before. So if I turn on this manual override and move the car forward, you can see that it's lighting up. And it also shows here as the input to the neural network. So this part is exactly the same as before, but only one input. And the network is really simple. It's just one neuron here making the decisions. And the only decision it can make is to go forward. We can control the car to do more than that. Like, we have access to all its capabilities here if I'm going to use the arrow keys, but this neural network can't decide all that. It only has the potential to go forward or not go forward. And at the moment, it's doing nothing. Like, if I'm going to turn off manual override, the car just stands still. This neuron is not lighting up. And the reason for that is how this thing works. So this input value coming from the sensor here, we can call this x. It's a variable. This value is multiplied by the weight. In this case, it's 0. And then if this value, x times this weight, is greater than the bias here, which is also 0, then this neuron lights up. But it can't be greater than the bias because this is 0 here. So any value for x multiplied by 0, it's going to be 0. And 0 is not greater than 0. So with this neural network here, it can never light up, no matter what the input says. We could make it light up by lowering the bias here. For example, let's make it minus 0.1, 0. It crashed there. But basically any value here that is negative is going to work, and 0 or any positive value for the bias is not going to turn this network on ever, because the result of x times w here is always 0 because w is 0. So let's just leave this bias to something like minus 0.2 and restart the simulation and see the car going forward like that. It never stops now, okay? Because again, no matter what the value for x here, it's never going to be anything else than 0 when multiplied by 0. So this also needs to be something for it to work. And let's turn on manual override and restart and go somewhere up here with the car. For example, this location. And let's try to modify this weight so that this neuron turns off, because we want the car to stop going forward when it sees something so that it doesn't crash. You can try playing with this weight and having large values like this, and you'll see that nothing happens. This output neuron still says go forward. But if you go lower values, negative values, minus 0.2, 0.3, 4, 5, 6, minus 0.6 in this case, then this neuron turned off. And if I'm going to move the car a little bit here, you can see that there is this kind of sweet spot there where this neuron turns on and off. Let's restart this simulation and turn off the manual override, and the car still hits that place. So we need a different value for W. Let's put back manual override, restart, and let's try to get maybe somewhere here so that when we are further away, it turns off. So I'm going to modify now this weight and go lower. Looks like minus 0.8 is a value. But we can go actually even lower than this. So maybe minus 0.9, minus 1. And let's see what the result is here. You can see now this sweet spot is much lower here. Let's try to see what happens now. So restart this simulation and turn off the manual override. And it stopped. It didn't crash anymore. It stopped exactly at this dotted line here. Nice. So let's turn back on the manual override, restart, and see where is the spot where it changes. So here, this is the moment where it changes from on to off. And if you look at the input value, this 0.19, and play a little bit with the car at that point, you will see that it changes at 20, basically. This 20 is the same value as here, but minus 20 in this case. And it's clear why that is if you look at this weight value, because it's just minus 1. So whatever x is multiplied by minus 1 means minus x has to be greater than minus 0.2, or x less than 0.2, because the sign switches if you multiply by a negative value. So that's why these values are matching right now, because this weight is 1, minus 1, but basically it doesn't have any scaling effect other than flipping the sign. So having weights of 1 or minus 1 are making the math easier in a way. But basically what this means is that if x is going to be less than 20%, then this neuron stays on. Otherwise, the neuron stays off. Now, there is a way to visualize things so that we don't have to do this kind of mental math all the time. I'll show you. You just go here in the title and say S is equal to FWD underscore D. And it's the same thing as before. If you will turn off the manual override, you will see that the car is going to stop at this dotted line. But now this thing appears here at the bottom. This axis here is the same thing that we are visualizing here and here. So 0.79, or the 79%, it means 79% of this arrow. That's where this yellow dot is present. So this arrow is for the input value. Changing back to manual override, you can see that I'm moving this point up and down because that's how the relationship with the sensor is changing. This point will always be in the positive side of this axis, because if we go far away like this, the smallest value that the sensor can read is 0, so it aligns like that. And there is also this other line here and this lighter region. This is controlled by the weight and the bias. The bias, if you're going to lower it, make it even smaller, it's going to move that region up. And increasing it is going to move that region down. Now we had it at minus 0.2. Let's keep this value. And let's see what happens when we modify the weight. Increasing it does this, and decreasing it does that. It changes the slope of that line. So this describes a line. And the lighter region that I have here, I made it so that when this yellow dot is inside of this lighter region, it means that this neuron turns on. So now if I'm going to move the car up a bit, you can see that that place where the lighter region intersects the axis is the same spot where the neuron turns on and off. So you can tell where that point is just visually. This is 20% of the whole distance here without doing any mental calculations. And this network that we have here that solves our problem is not the only one that solves our problem. Let me show you. You can put here a value of minus 0.1, and then this value, let's change it to minus 0.5. And you can see that this point lines up again. The difference now is that this slope right here decreases at a slower rate, at half the rate that the value on x is. And this network works exactly as before. So if I restart this and remove the manual override, you can see that the car is stopping exactly at the same spot. So there are two solutions for the problem. Now, homework task for you. Think about it. How many solutions are there really? Let me know in the comments. Let's do the math as well to confirm that this point here is at 20%. So x times minus 0.5 has to be equal to minus 0.1. So dividing by minus 0.5 means that x is equal to 1 divided by 5, basically, and that is 20%. And you could write this in code. You could make a simple if statement and say, if minus 0.5x, if the variable x is the input, is greater than minus 0.1, then accelerate. Otherwise, do nothing. So that piece of code is the same thing as what this neural network is doing. It's important to understand that the neural networks are capable of doing these kind of if statements. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you here. If you click on this diagram, it's going to show you a simplified view where it only uses one dimension. So these 2 dimensions here are important if you want to display this slope as well. So the simplified mode loses some information. We don't know what that slope is. But for understanding what happens here and seeing that the neuron is on when the sensor is reading in this section here, this is enough. And reducing from 2 dimensions to 1 dimension like this will mean that in the future we'll be able to show higher dimensions easier. So losing some information, but it will let us do some nice visualizations later on. Play around with these values again and see how the visualization changes there. Maybe we use the minus 0.2 value and the minus 1 weight, the one with the simple math from previously, and you see it still looks the same as before. But the slope now decreases much faster at the same rate as x. And what I mean by that is if I'm going to go here and put this bias to 0, whatever the value is here, it's going to be the same here. So this is essentially a square. Now, if this weight is going to decrease by 0.5, for example, then this rectangle here is not a square anymore. It actually fits 2 squares because the rate this decreases is half of this x. Now, believe it or not, I'm not done talking about just one output there. Next time we'll still have only one output there, and there's a lot to talk about it. But I want to leave you with something more fun to do. So go here at the top and say S is equal to BCK. And now you can practice having 2 outputs going forward and backward and see what you can do with that. Let me just show you something real quick. So here, this is the same as before. You can control this lighter grayish region, but the other is going to control this green region here. So if I'm going to increase this bias so that it goes like that and decrease this one, now the car is going to go backwards in the beginning. Your homework is going to be to make it go forward and then bounce back like that. People teach neural networks in different ways, and that can make things confusing. I'm going to try to clarify some things now. You don't really have to listen to this part. It won't matter in the rest of the lessons, but it might help you someday. Now, some people say that for the neuron to light up, x times the weight must be greater or equal to the bias. Not really a big change, but that neuron would light up now with everything set to 0, and in ours, it doesn't. But you can always make a small change to the bias and it's going to work pretty much the same. There's no real reason to choose one over the other, so you will find both implementations out there. Just don't be confused. Another thing people do is move the bias here on the left. Same thing so far, but they also changed the minus to a plus. This doesn't seem right. I mean, it's not the same thing anymore. But again, it doesn't really matter. Any network you find that works in the first case can be transformed into one that works in the second case. Just flip the value of the bias. The reason you find this implementation is because it looks like the line equation, something people are familiar with. I like to use the neuron fires when stimulated above a threshold idea, so it's just personal preference. Another thing you may find is people removing the bias entirely, but that would break things. We saw earlier that we really need the bias. So for it to still work, they add here an extra weight connected to a fake node that is always on. So this weight here acts exactly like the bias, and everything is all right. I think people like this because it groups together all parameters in one thing, so to speak. Now, this here is called an activation function, and this one in particular is a step function. There are others that are more powerful, like a sigmoid here would produce values between 0 and 1, so the car could be more like in the real world and accelerate more or less depending on the situation. I don't want to teach smooth activation functions because our controls here are binary, and it would make things more complicated. Our car will still be able to control the speed by pressing the acceleration at different rates, so we don't really need those. But they are important when doing machine learning. A gradient like that helps optimize the networks. That's why you'll find them everywhere, like in this other playground I found while building mine. It's really great, a bit more abstract, but a really useful learning tool. So check that one out as well. We learned what one neuron can do with one input. Next, we'll see when one input is not enough. We'll try using 2 inputs and even a hidden layer. Prepare for some neurons in the shadows. Open the playground from the link in the description. It should have here fwd_g as the session name. Now let's have the same network as before. So minus 0.5 for the weight and minus 0.1 for the bias. And the car is going to stop right here at this dotted line. Let's change the objective so that it goes up as much as possible. So can we figure out a network that lets the car go as much as it can before hitting the border there? And we could try playing with this. Basically, it's kind of logical that this needs to be a little bit to the right. So maybe moving the bias like this. This might be too much. Let's try it. Too much. We probably need to change also this, maybe something like that. I don't know. Still too much. This is tedious. We can also do something else to figure it out. We can use the genetic algorithm from phase 1. It's right here. Let me show you. When it optimizes here, it's going to try to create many different cars simultaneously. And each of them have a different network. How different from the one we started with is controlled by this slider here. So if I'm going to go down all the way and press this button again, you will see apparently just one car going up, but it's actually 100 or whatever going up, and this network is the same that we were playing with before. Here in this simulation, when the car touches the border, it disappears entirely because there are many of them and I don't want it to be too crowded. So let's try to give a little bit of a mutation here. And that means that the network is going to be similar to the one before, but not exactly the same. So now you can see that we found a car that is pretty much touching the border, but it didn't disappear. It's still here. So it's a good car. And when we find a good car like this, we press this save button. And now we have this new car to work with. Like if we close this optimizer from here, you can see it going up and then stopping exactly there, pretty much. Let's see close. Is it really very close, or could it go even higher? It might go even higher a little bit. Let's try optimizing again. Let's save and try again. Every time we run this optimization, the previous best car is not lost. So if it looks good, saving in the worst case, it's just going to give us the same thing we have previously. We don't lose anything valuable like this. So let's save again. And the last time, I just want to be sure that I'm getting as good value as I can get there. Save. I think it looks kind of like as before, so maybe it was good the first time already. And these values, minus 0.56 and minus 0.14. Let's figure out what this value is here. Turning on the calculator, and 0.14 divided by 0.56. 0.25. So that seems to be the point here, 0.25. But this weight and bias are quite complicated. We already start to have now the second decimal there. And these are some things that we can expect from neural networks. They don't give us the easiest way to write 0.25 there. There are several easier ones that I can think of right off the bat. For example, here I could put minus 0.1. Now, if you press the 0 key on your keyboard, it's going to zero that, and lower like this, minus 0.1, and this could be minus 0.4. So zero that, minus 0.4. So this should be the same thing as before. Let's try to restart. And it is. But it's a simpler one, because 1 divided by 4 is 25%. So easier for us to understand the values, but the end result is the same. There are other values here that are easy to understand, like minus 1 and minus 25. For these small values, when scrolling, hold down the Shift key. This is going to make you scroll more precisely like that. So refresh. And this one works as well. There are many solutions here. The one found by the genetic algorithm is just one of them. And these, for me at least, are easier to understand when I look at the numbers, what is really going on here. Now, it's important to stop and think, what is the car really learning here? What is this function for? And one thing that can help with that is changing here the title FWD_B. And we get the same thing, but now the car is a bus. And you can see it doesn't work. The reason why it doesn't work is that the bus is longer. So the distance here from the center of the sensor to the tip of the bus is longer than we had before. So it is going to touch. We could run the same optimizer again and find a solution that works for the bus. So that's no problem. But the same brain that we had previously doesn't work also for the bus and for the previous car that we had. Let's save this one and now close, and let's see the bus going smoothly, and it stopped perfectly there. But if we go back now, we can see that the car is stopping not anymore in the last moment where it could stop there, because it's using the brain that we made for the bus. So this is important, how big the car is. And in some cases, real life cases, people are making the same kind of cars equipped with the same kind of brains, and then they have different brains for other cars that are different, just because the car has a different size to it. If you want to have one brain that does everything, then the size of the car has to be an input here, an additional input. We won't be doing anything like that here. It's not very complicated, but I don't want to teach you about the buses here. I just want to focus on the cars. But basically, we need to be able to understand that a longer car needs to stop accelerating earlier than a shorter one. Now let's go back to these values here, -1 and -0.25, like this. Restart just to see that it works. And another thing that doesn't work is if you write here FWD_2. So we have the same car from previously, and it goes just as expected, but there's another car on the left, and both of them have the same brain. So, interestingly, the car on the left does nothing. Stop and try to figure out why. Maybe pause the video and think about it. I'm gonna start talking again in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So there are 2 dots here on the right. One is for the car on the right, the one that is moving, and the other one is outside of this region to begin with. So this car is so close that it's already inside of that black region where the neuron doesn't fire. So it's never going to start. If the car is too close there, it's never going to start. And you can really tell that something else is needed here. I mean, what happens if we do make this car move just like this? For example, we can lower this bias more, like that. It's moving, right? But if we restart the simulation, that means that this other car on the right is going to crash because it's going to stop accelerating much later. So we can't have them both, not with one input here. Let's see what happens if we introduce the speed as well. So here at the top, S is equal to SPD_2. And now we have some extra things here. We're going to get to them in a little bit. But first, let's just put some values for these weights and biases. Let's put -4 here, -0.4, and -0.4 here as well. And here -0.3. And let's refresh. And something happens, and arguably it's better than before. It's not perfect. This car is not going all the way till the end. This one is also not going till the end. It's worse than the one on the right, but both of them move this time. So it looks like something. Now, before we get into what is happening here, I want to show you a nice tool. This Desmos calculator has a 3D version now. So desmos.com/3D here. And let's write the same function we had previously. So -0.4x -0.4y has to be greater than -0.3. And you can see a flat surface here. this red region in the xy plane. Now, just a little bit of exploring here. This is the same thing as if you write minus 0 for x, minus 0 for y, plus 0.3 greater than 0, right? So let's write that. Plus 0.3 greater than 0. It's exactly the same thing. We just moved that one term. Now, if we remove the greater than 0, we move out of the xy plane and we're in 3D now. We are defining a plane. This now, what we have here, is not defining a line anymore. It's defining a plane. And only when we do that kind of comparison, like equal to 0 means the line where that intersects the xy plane there, or greater than 0 means all the parts of this plane that are above water, so to speak. So positive values. Now this 0.3 here is called the z-intercept. It's actually this point right here where the plane is touching this z-axis. Because if x and y are 0 here, then you get just that. So that's why it's called the z-intercept. And this here controls the rate of decrease, in this case on the x, and this one the rate of decrease on the y. So this plane is tilted in the same way on x as it is on y. But if you would have here minus 0.8y, for example, it's going to be tilted on x less than it is tilted on y. It's much more tilted this way than this way. But let's go back to our original one. So minus 0.4y. And let's go here and have this XY orientation and zoom in a little bit because we are only interested in values between -1 and 1. Now, this is not centered really well. You can go to these settings here and say center origin. We can also make these surfaces translucent like that so we can see through it. Let's zoom out a bit so that this 1 appears here and -1 is here. So this, what you see here, is the same that what I am plotting here. I'm just using a little bit of shading here. So kind of like the plane going under the water there. You can see it like that. And there is a slider here at the bottom that actually controls how pixelated this image is. It takes effort, processing power to calculate this image right here. So I don't really recommend getting this smooth version from the left side, sticking to something like this and above if your computer starts to burn up. But basically this plane, where this plane is above the water, that's when this is going to trigger now. So if these dots appear to be on land, then that is going to trigger for them. And this mode also has a simplified view because this is showing a 3D space here, right? But we don't really care about what is going underwater. So if you click on this once, it's a simplified view showing just the part of the plane that is above water. Or you can consider it like that. So back to the 2D space coming after we have an inequality sign there. So let's rerun now the simulation and see what is happening here. It's very interesting, right? You should take a moment and try running this many times and paying close attention to what is really going on there. So this car on the left that is stopping early, it's this point. It's moving on the edge of this plane here and then somehow going down and stopping early. The other one, the car on the right, goes higher here and somehow slingshots away from this plane. Like it jumps from there, kind of. And it falls down later. Interesting, isn't it? Now, if you look at the top here, I can only show one of the two branes. They are the same brain, so the same value for this weight, the same value for that weight, and for the bias, but the inputs for them differ, because now this one is closer, so it has a larger value for this 0.86. This is 0.86 here, this is going to be smaller, right? So the brane that you see on the right here is going to be from this car here. And if you turn on manual override, you can see that brane changing while I'm moving that car. And look at what the point is doing on the right. So I'm moving the car forward and backwards and forward and backwards. And because I'm changing the speed like that, it kind of looks like it's drawing a circle, because it moves the point up and down, also below the 0 point vertically, because the speed can be negative in this case. But combined with the sensor there is also moving it from the left to right. So somehow it's drawing a circular pattern there. Of course, if you would do this somewhere below here where this doesn't read anything, then that point just moves up and down like that, because there is nothing moving it left to right. The sensor isn't picking up anything. And of course, if I'm stopped, then the point is just going to lie on the horizontal axis like that. So really, there is a lot going on here. And I recommend you play with this. It's really fun. But let's try to optimize this so that the cars go as much as possible. And let's use the optimizer from here. So hopefully we're going to get cars that are going to be as close as possible to the